The cold ice cut into Oliver's face as two police officers pushed him hard to the ground. A heavy knee pressed into his back, making it very hard to breathe. His right arm was twisted back in deep pain. But Oliver, an active-duty Navy SEAL, did not panic. His only focus was his loyal German shepherd, Duke. The large dog was furiously ready to attack the cops to protect his master. If Duke moved even one step, the scared officer with a loaded gun would shoot him. Struggling for air, Oliver forced his free hand up. He made a silent military hand signal. It was a strict order for his dog to stay still. The corrupt police officer smiled, thinking he had easily broken another innocent man in his town. But he did not know his local badge was about to become completely useless. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments which country you are watching from, and if you love stories that melt your heart, please subscribe to support our channel. The heavy tires of the black truck crushed the packed snow on the winding mountain road. Oliver gripped the leather steering wheel. He kept his eyes locked on the treacherous path ahead. The heating vents blasted warm air into the cabin, but the bitter cold of the Oregon winter still seeped through the thick glass. Oliver was a man forged by the military. His shoulders were broad, and his posture remained perfectly rigid even after hours of driving. He had short dark hair and sharp, analytical eyes that missed nothing in his surroundings. He was an active-duty Navy SEAL, but today he wore no uniform. He wore a simple black jacket, dark jeans, and heavy boots. Today was not a mission. Today was a funeral. Next to him in the passenger seat sat Duke. Duke was a massive, purebred German shepherd. His thick coat was a striking mix of deep black and rich tan. Duke rested his head on his massive front paws. His ears twitched at every sound the truck made. Duke was not just a pet. He was a highly trained working dog, disciplined and fiercely loyal to the man sitting beside him. Oliver reached over and rubbed the space between Duke's ears. The dog looked up and let out a soft, content huff. "Almost there, buddy," Oliver said. His voice was low and calm. The landscape outside the window was entirely white and gray. Tall pine trees bent under the massive weight of fresh snow. The sky hung low over the mountains, looking like a heavy sheet of bruised iron. They were entering Oakhaven. It was a remote, isolated logging town. People here worked hard and kept to themselves. Oliver knew this place only from the stories his friend Miller used to tell. Miller was born here. He was also a SEAL. They had served together on 3 combat deployments. 2 weeks ago, Miller died during a disastrous night training operation. Oliver came to pay his final respects. He owed his fallen brother that much. The mountain road finally straightened out. Small wooden houses appeared on the sides of the street. Gray smoke drifted from brick chimneys into the freezing air. The town looked tired and worn down. The main street consisted of a small diner, a hardware store, and a single gas station. Oliver checked the dashboard fuel gauge. The orange needle hovered dangerously near empty. He tapped the blinker and pulled the heavy truck into the snow-covered lot of the gas station. Oliver shifted the transmission into park and turned off the engine. "Stay here, Duke," he commanded. Duke immediately sat up straight. He did not bark. He simply watched his master open the heavy door. The freezing air hit Oliver like a physical blow to the chest. He pulled up the collar of his jacket. The winter wind carried the harsh smell of pine needles and diesel exhaust. He walked to the back of the truck, unhooked the rusty gas pump, and inserted the nozzle into the tank. The red numbers on the digital screen began to tick upward. The silence of the town felt heavy. It felt unnatural, like a place holding its breath. A white police cruiser turned the corner and rolled aggressively into the gas station lot. The massive engine grumbled loudly. The cruiser stopped right next to the entrance of the small convenience store. 2 men stepped out of the vehicle. Oliver kept his hands in his jacket pockets and watched them. He observed people out of pure habit. It was a skill that kept him alive in hostile zones. The first officer was tall and heavy-set. His uniform looked extremely tight around his thick stomach. He had a thick, dark mustache and small, cold eyes. His silver name tag read Hayes. He walked with an exaggerated, arrogant swagger. He clearly wanted everyone around to look at him. The second officer was younger and wiry. He had sharp cheekbones and a strange, nervous energy. He constantly adjusted the duty belt around his waist. His name tag read Vance. A teenager wearing greasy blue coveralls came out of the store. He carried a large cardboard box full of heavy windshield wiper fluid bottles. The boy looked about 17 years old. He was thin and actively shivering in the freezing cold. Hayes stopped directly in front of the boy. The heavy-set officer did not move out of the narrow walkway. He stood like a wall in the boy's path. "Where do you think you are going?" Hayes asked. His voice was incredibly loud. He wanted everyone in the lot to hear his authority. "Just restocking the shelves outside, Officer Hayes," the boy said quickly. He looked down at his boots in the snow. His fingers gripped the heavy cardboard box tightly. Vance stepped to the side, intentionally boxing the young boy in against the brick wall. "You look nervous, kid. You hiding something illegal in that box?" "No, sir. Just fluid." Hayes reached out and shoved the front of the box. He did not push it hard enough to knock the boy over, but it was enough force to make the kid stumble backward. The heavy box slipped from his frozen fingers. It hit the icy ground hard. 3 plastic bottles of blue fluid tumbled out into the dirty black snow. "Look at that," Hayes laughed loudly. "Clumsy kid. Pick it up right now." The boy immediately dropped to his bare knees in the snow. He scrambled frantically to gather the bottles. His hands were entirely bare and bright red from the freezing temperature. He did not complain. He did not look angry. He just looked totally terrified. Vance nudged one of the plastic bottles with the tip of his heavy black boot. He kicked it slightly out of the boy's desperate reach. The boy crawled forward through the slush to grab it. Both officers laughed together. It was an ugly, cruel sound. Oliver watched the entire exchange from the gas pump. His jaw tightened instantly. He knew bullies perfectly well. He had seen them operate all over the world. They always targeted the weak people who could not fight back. Oliver did not move his feet, but his entire posture changed. His muscles tensed in preparation. His sharp eyes locked directly onto Hayes. Hayes turned his head and caught the stranger staring at him. The officer's cruel smile vanished entirely. He puffed out his large chest and stared back aggressively. He expected Oliver to look down at the ground. People in this town always looked away. Oliver did not blink. He held the intense gaze effortlessly. His face remained completely blank and stoic, showing zero fear and absolutely no submission. The gas pump clicked loudly, breaking the silence. The tank was finally full. Oliver slowly turned his head away, removed the dripping nozzle, and placed it back securely on the metal stand. He screwed the gas cap tightly shut. He could physically feel the angry eyes of both officers burning into his back. He truly did not care. He turned around and walked purposefully toward the convenience store to pay for his fuel. As Oliver passed the 2 officers, Hayes stepped forward abruptly. He closed the physical distance, standing far too close to Oliver. He wanted to intimidate the newcomer. "You lost, buddy?" Hayes asked in a low, threatening tone. Oliver stopped walking. He turned his head slowly and looked directly at Hayes again. The height difference between them was minimal, but Oliver's physical presence was entirely different. He possessed a quiet, extremely dangerous stillness that most normal men completely lacked. "No," Oliver said calmly. "Just one single word. Flat. Absolute." Vance quickly placed a nervous hand on his radio. The younger officer clearly felt the dangerous shift in the cold air. Oliver held eye contact with Hayes for 2 more silent seconds. Then he simply walked past them and opened the heavy glass door to the store. The little brass bell above the door rang cheerfully. Hayes stared at the slowly closing door. His face turned bright red with sudden anger. He absolutely hated being ignored. He hated the total lack of respect from a stranger. He pulled out a small notepad and memorized the license plate number of the large black truck. Inside the warm truck, Duke watched everything through the thick window. The large dog's ears were pinned flat against his head. He sensed the strong hostility in the air. He sat perfectly still and waited for his master to return. The logging town of Oakhaven was freezing cold, but a very different kind of dangerous fire was just starting to burn. The funeral concluded in less than 20 minutes. Oliver stood near the back of the small cemetery. He watched the wooden coffin slowly lower into the frozen earth. A military honor guard folded the American flag into a tight triangle. They handed it to Miller's weeping widow. Oliver felt a familiar, heavy block of ice form in his chest. He lost many good men overseas. Losing one during a training exercise back home felt incredibly wrong. The cold wind howled across the gravestones. It carried the bitter reality of death. Oliver saluted his fallen brother one last time. He turned around and walked back to his black truck. Duke sat patiently in the passenger seat. The large dog rested his chin on the windowsill. Oliver opened the heavy door and climbed inside. He did not speak. He started the engine and drove back toward the center of Oakhaven. The sky grew darker. The weak winter sun completely disappeared behind a thick wall of gray clouds. The town streetlights flickered on. They cast a sickly yellow glow over the snow-covered sidewalks. Oliver parked the truck in front of a small glowing neon sign. The sign read, Oakhaven Diner. It blinked intermittently. "Wait here, Duke," Oliver commanded. He rolled the window down exactly 2 inches to give the dog fresh air. Duke let out a soft whine, but stayed perfectly still in his seat. Oliver pushed the glass door of the diner open. The bell above the door rang with a dull, flat sound. The interior smelled intensely of burnt coffee and old frying oil. A few locals sat scattered in cracked red vinyl booths. 2 large men in heavy flannel shirts ate in total silence at the counter. A young couple huddled together in a dark corner booth. Everyone looked tired. Oliver chose a booth directly by the large front window. He wanted a clear view of his truck and the street outside. A waitress walked over to his table. She was an older woman named Martha. She had thin gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Deep wrinkles lined her forehead. Her pink uniform apron carried several old coffee stains. She held a small green notepad. "What can I get you, hon?" Martha asked. Her voice sounded rough, like she smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. "Black coffee and 2 scrambled eggs." "Thank you," Oliver replied. Martha nodded slowly. She looked at his upright posture and sharp eyes. She recognized the military demeanor instantly. "You here for the Miller boys' service?" "Yes, ma'am," Oliver said softly. Martha let out a heavy sigh. He was a good kid. "This town takes the good ones too early. I will bring your coffee right out." Martha walked away. Oliver stared out the cold window. The street was practically empty. Then, a figure slowly moved into the circle of yellow light cast by the street lamp. It was an old homeless man. He looked incredibly fragile. He wore 3 layers of dirty, oversized coats. A torn green sleeping bag was tied around his waist like a thick belt. He pushed a rusty metal shopping cart filled with crushed aluminum cans and dirty plastic bags. He walked with a severe, painful limp. Oliver watched the old man struggle to push the cart over a mound of frozen slush. The wheels squeaked loudly in the quiet night. Suddenly, the aggressive roar of an engine shattered the silence. The same white police cruiser from the gas station swerved around the corner. It sped up unnecessarily and slammed on the brakes right next to the old man. The tires slid over the icy road. The front bumper stopped mere inches from the rusty shopping cart. Officer Hayes and Officer Vance kicked their doors open. They stepped out into the freezing cold. Oliver leaned forward in his booth. His eyes narrowed. He watched intently through the glass. Hayes walked directly up to the old man. He did not say a word at first. He just stood there and blocked the path. The old man began to shake violently. He pulled his dirty coat tighter around his thin neck. He tried to turn his cart around to walk in the opposite direction. Vance stepped up and grabbed the front of the cart. He yanked it hard. The sudden force pulled the old man forward. The homeless man lost his balance and fell heavily to his knees in the freezing snow. Hayes threw his head back and laughed. It was the same cruel, ugly laugh from the gas station. He kicked the side of the shopping cart with his heavy black boot. The cart tipped over completely. Dozens of dirty aluminum cans spilled out. They rolled across the icy street. "We told you to stay out of the main street, Arthur," Hayes shouted loudly. The old man on the ground raised his trembling hands to protect his face. "I was just crossing, officer. I just wanted to cross the street." Inside the diner, the atmosphere instantly changed. It turned completely silent. The two men at the counter stopped eating. They stared down at their plates. The young couple in the corner booth suddenly found the sugar packets on their table intensely fascinating. Martha stood perfectly still behind the counter. She gripped the glass coffee pot so tightly her knuckles turned bright white. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke a single word of protest. They were all completely paralyzed by deep, ingrained fear. Oliver looked around the room. He saw the exact same fear he had witnessed in oppressed villages overseas. The absolute terror of a corrupt authority. These people accepted the abuse because they believed they had no other choice. Oliver looked back out the window. Hayes reached down and grabbed the old man by the collar of his thick coat. He pulled Arthur halfway up from the snow. Vance pulled out his heavy wooden baton and tapped it rhythmically against his palm. Oliver felt a cold, hard rage settle in his stomach. He remembered the oath he took the day he became a Navy SEAL. He swore to defend the Constitution. He swore to protect the innocent and the defenseless. That oath did not expire when he took off his uniform. It did not disappear just because he was on leave. A warrior does not sit in a warm room and watch the strong crush the weak. Oliver stood up from the booth. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $20 bill. He dropped it onto the table. Martha looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Don't do it, son," she whispered desperately. "They own this town. They will ruin you." Oliver did not answer. He turned and walked straight toward the exit. He pushed the heavy glass door open. The little brass bell rang again. The freezing night air hit his face. The snow crunched loudly under his heavy boots. He walked with total, undeniable purpose. Every step was measured and balanced. He stepped off the curb and walked into the center of the street. He stopped exactly 10 feet away from the two officers. Hayes still held the old man by his coat collar. He turned his head and glared at the newcomer. He recognized Oliver immediately. The annoyance in his eyes flared into genuine anger. "Turn around and walk back inside, tough guy," Hayes ordered aggressively. "This is official police business." Oliver stood perfectly still. He kept his hands visible, hanging loosely by his sides. His voice cut through the freezing air like a sharp blade. It was incredibly calm, but carried the undeniable weight of absolute authority. "Let him go." Hayes squinted. He let go of Arthur's coat. The old man collapsed back into the snow. Hayes turned his entire body to face Oliver. He placed his right hand firmly on the handle of his holstered sidearm. "What did you just say to me?" Hayes demanded. "I said, let him go," Oliver repeated clearly. "He is unarmed. He poses no threat. You are violating his civil rights. Back away from him." Vance gripped his wooden baton tighter. He took a step forward to flank Oliver. "You have exactly 3 seconds to get back in that diner," Hayes commanded. His voice shook with barely contained anger. "You are abusing an unarmed man," Oliver replied. He kept his voice completely steady. "I will not walk away." Hayes did not hesitate. He drew his heavy wooden baton and swung it directly at Oliver's head. Oliver reacted purely on instinct. He raised his left arm and blocked the thick stick. The brutal impact sent a sharp jolt of pain down to his elbow. He did not strike back. He knew the legal consequences of assaulting a police officer. He needed to handle this situation correctly. Vance lunged from the blind side. He tackled Oliver aggressively around the waist. The sudden heavy weight forced Oliver backward. His boots slipped on the treacherous ice. Hayes immediately stepped forward. He delivered a brutal, driving punch directly into Oliver's stomach. The heavy blow forced all the air from Oliver's lungs. He collapsed onto his knees in the freezing slush. Both officers quickly descended on him. They grabbed his jacket and shoved him face down onto the frozen asphalt. The jagged ice cut deep into Oliver's cheek. Warm blood trickled down his face. The extreme cold shocked his system. Hayes drove his heavy knee directly into the center of Oliver's back. The immense physical pressure pinned Oliver tightly to the ground. Vance grabbed Oliver's right arm and wrenched it violently behind his back. The shoulder joint popped loudly in the quiet night. "Stop resisting!" Hayes shouted. He deliberately yelled to make sure the people in the diner heard him. He wanted to create a completely false narrative. Oliver did not resist. He lay flat on the freezing ice. He kept his muscles entirely relaxed. Struggling only gave them a valid excuse to inflict more severe pain. He tasted copper blood in his mouth. He breathed slowly and rhythmically through his nose. He relied on years of brutal military survival training to manage the intense pain. The freezing slush soaked through his dark clothes. He felt the heavy metal of handcuffs bite viciously into his wrists. Inside the diner, the patrons crowded nervously around the large front window. Martha pressed her wrinkled hands against the cold glass. The young couple watched in absolute horror. The two men in flannel shirts stood perfectly still in complete silence. No one dared to step outside. No one shouted for the officers to stop their assault. The deep fear of Hayes and Vance paralyzed the entire town. Suddenly, a terrifying sound shattered the quiet street. It was a deep, vicious roar. It sounded exactly like a wild predator defending its territory. Inside the black truck, Duke watched the officers brutally attack his master. The German shepherd's fierce protective instincts completely took over. He did not whine. He did not bark a simple warning. He went into full combat mode. Duke threw his massive 90-pound body against the passenger side door. He hit the window with extreme, desperate force. The heavy truck rocked on its suspension. He hit the glass again. He threw his entire weight into the door panel. The internal metal latch suddenly cracked under the immense pressure. The heavy door swung open. Duke leaped out of the truck. His paws hit the icy road with a heavy thud. He bared his sharp white teeth. Thick saliva dripped from his powerful jaws. He locked his furious eyes entirely on Hayes. He charged forward. His sharp claws tore at the packed snow. He moved with terrifying, blinding speed. Vance looked up. He saw the massive dog charging toward them. Complete panic washed over the young officer's pale face. He instantly dropped Oliver's arm and scrambled backward. He slipped clumsily on the ice and fell hard onto his back. "Shoot that thing!" Vance screamed in pure terror. Hayes turned his head quickly. His eyes went wide with genuine fear. He saw the black and tan missile rushing directly at his throat. Hayes panicked completely. He let go of Oliver and frantically reached for his service weapon. His thick fingers fumbled badly with the leather holster strap. He ripped the heavy gun free and raised it unsteadily toward the charging dog. Oliver realized the deadly danger instantly. He knew Hayes would shoot Duke. He knew Duke would tear Hayes apart if the bullet missed. He had to stop the violence right now. Oliver completely ignored the blinding pain in his twisted shoulder. He ignored the freezing ice against his bleeding face. He pushed himself up slightly from the hard ground. He could not shout loudly. The severe blow to his stomach still restricted his breathing. He had to rely on his silent commands. Oliver managed to free his left hand from the loose grip of the fallen Vance. He raised his hand high into the cold air. He formed a very specific fist and snapped his fingers open instantly. It was a strict military hand signal. It meant an immediate halt. "Duke, hold!" Oliver commanded. His voice came out as a harsh, raspy grunt, but it carried the absolute, undeniable authority of a military handler. Duke was exactly 3 feet away from Hayes. The dog's powerful jaws were wide open. He prepared to launch his massive body into the air. He heard the familiar command. He saw the vital hand signal. The years of rigorous, intense training kicked in immediately. Duke stopped instantly. His heavy paws slid forcefully on the icy road. He braced himself and halted just inches from the dark barrel of the gun. The massive dog dropped his back legs and sat heavily on the snow. He did not retreat. He did not look away. He kept his furious eyes locked directly on Hayes. A low, terrifying rumble vibrated deeply in Duke's chest. He was a loaded weapon, waiting patiently for the command to fire. Hayes stood perfectly still. His hands shook violently. He pointed the gun directly at Duke's head. His breathing sounded ragged and loud in the quiet street. He looked totally terrified of the disciplined animal. "Call off your dog," Hayes stammered nervously. A bead of sweat ran down his cold forehead. "He is holding," Oliver said calmly from the ground. "He will not move. Lower your weapon." Hayes hesitated. He looked at the massive teeth inches away from his leg. He slowly lowered the gun, but did not holster it. He backed away very carefully. Vance scrambled to his feet. He looked pale and thoroughly humiliated. The old homeless man, Arthur, sat quietly in the snow nearby. He watched the entire scene with wide, disbelieving eyes. He saw a stranger sacrifice his own physical safety for him. He saw a loyal dog show more discipline than the local police force. Vance grabbed Oliver roughly by the collar and dragged him to his feet. He slammed Oliver hard against the side of the police cruiser. He secured the handcuffs tightly behind Oliver's back. The cold metal burned against Oliver's skin. "You are under arrest for assaulting an officer and resisting arrest," Hayes spat angrily. He desperately tried to regain his false authority in front of the diner window. Oliver did not argue. He stood tall against the cruiser. He looked at Duke. He gave a small, subtle nod. Duke remained perfectly still in the snow, watching silently as his master was taken away into the dark night. The back seat of the police cruiser smelled strongly of old sweat and cheap disinfectant. Oliver sat perfectly straight. The hard plastic seat offered no comfort. His hands were securely cuffed behind his back. His right shoulder throbbed with a dull, heavy ache. He ignored the physical pain. He stared blankly at the metal cage dividing the front and back seats. Hayes drove the cruiser aggressively. He took tight corners too fast. Vance sat in the passenger seat and typed furiously on the computer terminal. They pulled into the back lot of the Oakhaven Police Department. It was a square, ugly brick building. The yellow exterior lights flickered weakly in the freezing wind. Hayes opened the back door and pulled Oliver out roughly by his injured arm. Oliver stumbled slightly on the icy pavement, but quickly regained his absolute balance. He did not speak. He did not show any anger. He maintained total silence. They led him through a heavy metal door into the booking area. The room felt oppressively hot compared to the freezing air outside. A large wooden desk dominated the center of the room. Behind the desk sat Sergeant Briggs. Briggs was an older man with a heavily wrinkled face and a thick gray beard. He wore a stained white uniform shirt. He looked incredibly bored. "What do we have here, Hayes?" Briggs asked lazily. "Assaulting an officer. Resisting arrest." "Disorderly conduct," Hayes listed quickly. He sounded extremely proud of himself. He tried to interfere with official police business. Then he ordered his vicious dog to attack us. Oliver remained completely silent. He knew the absolute futility of arguing with corrupt officers inside their own station. He needed to stay calm. He needed a clear head to get out and find Duke. Hayes forcibly pushed Oliver against the cold concrete wall. He unlatched the heavy handcuffs. Oliver immediately brought his arms forward and rubbed his bruised wrists. His shoulder joint felt loose and painful. "Empty your pockets onto the counter," Vance ordered sharply. Oliver complied smoothly. He placed his wallet, keys, and phone onto the scratched wooden surface. Briggs picked up the wallet and flipped it open. He glanced at Oliver's military identification card. The older sergeant paused for a brief second, but he said nothing. He tossed the wallet into a clear plastic evidence bag. "Take off your jacket and your boots," Hayes commanded. Oliver removed his thick black jacket. His gray shirt had dark patches of dirty melted snow and fresh blood from his cut cheek. He took off his boots and placed them neatly on the floor. Vance grabbed Oliver's arm again and led him down a short, narrow hallway. They stopped in front of a small holding cell with thick iron bars. Vance shoved Oliver inside the dark cell. The heavy metal door slammed shut with a deafening clang. The lock clicked loudly. Oliver stood in the center of the tiny space. The cell contained a thin metal bench and a stainless steel toilet. The air smelled foul. He sat down slowly on the cold metal bench. He leaned his head against the concrete wall. He closed his eyes and immediately compartmentalized his anger. He focused entirely on a systematic breathing technique to lower his heart rate. Hayes walked down the hallway and stood triumphantly outside the iron bars. He held a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. He smiled a very ugly, arrogant smile. "You look pretty comfortable in there, tough guy," Hayes mocked loudly. "You military boys always think you are untouchable. You come into my town and try to tell me how to do my job. Now you get to sit in a cage." Oliver opened his eyes. He looked directly at the corrupt officer. "Where is my dog?" Hayes laughed loudly. Animal control picked him up. They dragged him away with a heavy catch pole. He is locked in a tiny steel cage across town right now. They classified him as a dangerous animal. You know what happens to dangerous animals that try to attack police officers? They get put down. A sharp spike of intense rage hit Oliver's chest. He wanted to break the iron bars and crush the man standing outside. But he forced his muscles to relax. He breathed in slowly. Showing emotion gave Hayes power. Oliver refused to give him anything. "He did not attack you," Oliver stated calmly. He held his position. "You are lying on your official report." "Who will believe you?" Hayes sneered confidently. "It is my word against yours, and I have the badge." Hayes turned around and walked back down the hallway. He felt completely invincible. He was wrong. 2 blocks away, inside a small, dark bedroom, the young teenager from the gas station sat in front of a bright computer screen. The boy had followed the police cruiser from the gas station earlier. He hated Hayes. He hid in the dark alleyway next to the diner. He held his phone with shaking hands. He recorded every single second of the brutal encounter. He captured Hayes kicking the old man. He captured the unprovoked assault on Oliver. Most importantly, he captured the incredible discipline of the German Shepherd, stopping inches from the loaded gun. The boy uploaded the high-definition video directly to a massive social media platform. He titled it, "Corrupt Oakhaven Police Assault Innocent Veteran." The internet moves with terrifying speed. Within 10 minutes, the video hit 1,000 views. Within 30 minutes, it crossed 50,000. People shared it furiously. The blatant abuse of power outraged viewers instantly. The heroic discipline of the dog captivated them. Inside the police station, the main telephone suddenly rang. Sergeant Briggs picked it up lazily. A voice yelled angrily at him. He hung up. The phone rang again instantly. Then a second line rang. Then a third. Within 5 minutes, every single phone line in the Oakhaven Police Department lit up aggressively. People from all over the country called to express their extreme outrage. The local dispatch system completely crashed under the immense volume of angry calls. The heavy front doors of the station suddenly flew open. Chief Weber stormed into the room. Weber was a short, heavy man with a bright red face. He wore a wrinkled gray suit instead of a uniform. He looked absolutely furious. He marched directly toward the booking desk. "Hayes!" Weber screamed at the top of his lungs. "Get out here right now!" Hayes rushed out of the break room. He looked completely confused. "What is going on, Chief?" Weber slammed a tablet down hard onto the wooden desk. The screen played the viral video on a continuous loop. "You absolute idiot. You assaulted an active-duty Navy SEAL in front of a camera. The governor's office just called my personal cell phone. The state police are sending investigators right now." Hayes turned completely pale. All of his previous arrogance vanished instantly. He stared at the video in total horror. "Get the keys," Weber ordered furiously. "Release him immediately. Drop every single charge. Do it right now, before this entire department gets burned to the ground." Hayes grabbed the heavy iron keys with violently shaking hands. He practically ran down the narrow hallway toward the holding cell. Oliver sat perfectly still on the metal bench. He heard the panicked shouting from the front room. He watched Hayes approach the cell. The officer looked terrified and desperate. Hayes unlocked the heavy metal door. The hinges squeaked loudly. He pulled the door open and stepped back quickly. "You are free to go," Hayes mumbled quietly. He stared at the floor. Oliver stood up slowly. He rolled his injured shoulder. He walked out of the cell. He did not say a single word to the trembling officer. He simply walked toward the front desk to retrieve his boots and his dog. The real battle was just beginning. Oliver walked out of the Oak Haven Police Department. He rubbed his sore wrists. The freezing wind immediately bit through his thin shirt. He ignored the cold. He had only one priority. He needed to find Duke. He walked exactly 2 blocks to the local animal control center. The building was a small, gray concrete structure attached to a public garage. The fluorescent lights flickered violently inside. Oliver pushed the heavy front door open. A young woman sat behind a scratched fiberglass counter. She looked up from her phone. "I am here for my dog," Oliver said. "A German Shepherd, brought in about an hour ago." The young woman swallowed hard. She clearly knew who he was. Word traveled incredibly fast in a small town. She did not ask for paperwork. She just nodded and grabbed a ring of heavy metal keys. She led him down a dark, narrow corridor filled with loud barking. Oliver heard Duke before he saw him. The deep, rumbling growl vibrated intensely through the concrete walls. Duke was locked in a small metal cage at the very end of the hall. The large dog paced relentlessly. He looked highly agitated. Then Duke saw Oliver. The massive dog stopped pacing instantly. He let out a sharp whine and pressed his heavy black nose against the chain-link fence. Oliver knelt in front of the cage. He placed his fingers through the cold metal wire. Duke licked his fingers frantically. "Open it," Oliver commanded the young woman. She quickly unlocked the heavy latch and stepped back. Duke pushed the door open. He did not jump aggressively. He simply pressed his heavy body firmly against Oliver's leg. Oliver stroked the thick fur on the dog's neck. He felt the rapid heartbeat begin to slow down. They were together again. Oliver walked Duke back to his black truck at the gas station. He started the engine and turned the heat up high. He needed a safe place to rest and carefully process the situation. He drove down the main road and pulled into the parking lot of the Pineview Motel. It was a rundown building with peeling yellow paint and a flickering neon vacancy sign. He rented a room on the ground floor for one night. The motel manager was an old man named Henry. Henry handed over the brass key with trembling hands. He kept glancing nervously at the street outside. Oliver understood why. A white police cruiser sat parked directly across the street. The engine idled softly. The headlights were turned off, but Oliver easily saw the dark silhouette of Officer Hayes sitting behind the wheel. They were watching him. Oliver entered the small motel room. He locked the flimsy wooden door and pulled the thin curtains shut. Duke immediately lay down on the faded green carpet directly in front of the door. He assumed a strict guard position. Oliver took off his jacket and checked his injured shoulder. It was badly bruised, but nothing was broken. He sat on the edge of the hard mattress and planned his next move. The harassment started early the next morning. Oliver walked out to his truck to retrieve a fresh shirt from his duffel bag. A bright yellow parking citation was securely tucked under his windshield wiper. He read the ticket. It cited him for parking a commercial vehicle in a residential zone. His truck was not commercial. The motel lot was not residential. He crumpled the paper and tossed it onto the dashboard. Later that afternoon, Oliver drove to the hardware store to buy some basic medical supplies for his cut cheek. A police cruiser followed him the entire way. They stayed exactly 2 car lengths behind. When Oliver parked, they parked. When he walked inside, they waited outside. He purchased bandages and antiseptic. He returned to his truck. He found another yellow ticket on the windshield. This one claimed his tires crossed the white parking line. They had not. He drove back to the motel. The cruiser followed him again. It was a blatant display of intimidation. They wanted him to feel completely surrounded. They wanted him to panic and make a foolish mistake. They clearly did not understand the disciplined man they were dealing with. That evening, Henry knocked softly on Oliver's door. Oliver opened it slowly. Duke stood right beside him, completely alert. "You need to leave, son," Henry whispered urgently. He looked over his shoulder at the dark street. "I saw the video online. Everyone saw it. But you do not understand these corrupt people. They own the local judges. They own the town council. They will not stop until they completely destroy you." "I have done nothing wrong," Oliver said calmly. "That does not matter here," Henry pleaded. "They will plant something illegal in your truck. They will manufacture a serious felony. You are a military man. You have a good career. Do not throw it away over pride. Just get in your truck and drive across the state line." Oliver looked at the old man. He appreciated the genuine concern, but running away was fundamentally against his nature. "If I run, they win. If I run, they keep doing this to the innocent people who cannot fight back. I am staying. Thank you for the warning, Henry." Oliver closed the door securely. He knew Henry was absolutely right about their dirty tactics. They would escalate. The severe escalation came the very next morning. Oliver stepped out of his room, holding a cup of black coffee. Duke walked closely by his side on a short leash. 3 police cruisers entirely blocked the exit of the motel parking lot. Chief Weber stood in the center. Officer Hayes and Officer Vance stood right behind him. They looked heavily armed and incredibly tense. Oliver stopped on the concrete walkway. He kept his posture entirely relaxed. He took a slow sip of his coffee. Chief Weber stepped forward. His face was bright red. He spoke in a cold, calculated tone. "You think you are very smart," Weber said. "You think a viral video makes you untouchable. The state investigators will leave in a few days. The internet will completely forget about you by next week. But we will still be here." Oliver remained totally silent. He just stared directly into Weber's eyes. Weber pointed a thick finger at Duke. "You got lucky yesterday. But I just signed a new departmental emergency order. We reviewed the street footage. Your animal showed severe aggressive tendencies toward law enforcement. I have officially classified your German Shepherd as a dangerous, life-threatening public menace." Oliver's jaw tightened instantly. His grip on the leather leash hardened. Weber smiled a vicious, triumphant smile. "That specific classification gives my officers the absolute legal right to confiscate the animal on site. If you do not leave my town in the next 60 minutes, we will take the dog by force. We will lock him up securely, and we will legally euthanize him." Hayes smirked from the background. He tapped the black handle of his gun intentionally. "You have 1 hour, soldier," Weber stated coldly. "Get out of Oak Haven, or you go home completely alone." The corrupt police officers turned around and walked slowly back to their cruisers. They left the heavy threat hanging in the freezing morning air. Oliver stood absolutely still. He looked down at Duke. Duke looked up with loyal, intelligent eyes. Oliver was not going to run. He was going to completely dismantle their trap. Oliver packed his dark duffel bag quickly. He moved with absolute precision. He knew Chief Weber was not bluffing. The corrupt police force would gladly kill Duke to break Oliver's spirit. Oliver refused to let that happen. He needed to get his dog across the state line immediately. Once Duke was safe, Oliver could return and deal with the Oak Haven Police Department properly. He zipped the bag shut and slung it over his uninjured shoulder. "Let us go, Duke," he commanded. The large German Shepherd stood up instantly. They walked out to the black truck. The freezing wind whipped across the empty parking lot. Oliver checked underneath the vehicle. He checked the wheel wells and the exhaust pipe. He looked for tracking devices or explosive sabotage. He found nothing. He opened the passenger door. Duke jumped inside and sat attentively. Oliver threw his bag into the back seat and climbed behind the wheel. He started the engine. The heater blasted warm air into the cold cabin. Oliver drove out of the Pineview Motel lot. He headed straight for the highway leading out of the valley. The town of Oak Haven quickly faded behind them. Thick pine forests rose on both sides of the narrow two-lane road. The tall trees blocked the weak winter sun. Shadows stretched heavily across the icy asphalt. Oliver kept his speed strictly at the legal limit. He checked his rearview mirror constantly. 10 miles outside of town, the trap sprang. A white police cruiser pulled out aggressively from a hidden logging trail. It accelerated hard and rode inches from Oliver's rear bumper. Almost immediately, a second cruiser emerged from a dirt side road ahead of him. The second vehicle merged into his lane and slammed on the brakes. Oliver reacted instantly. He tapped his brakes smoothly to avoid a collision. The cruiser behind him swerved slightly. Suddenly, the bright red and blue lights of both police vehicles flashed brilliantly in the dim forest. The loud sirens wailed. They were on a completely isolated stretch of mountain road. There were no houses. There were no side streets. There were 0 witnesses. This was exactly where corrupt men committed terrible crimes. Oliver pulled the heavy truck onto the snowy shoulder. He shifted into park and turned off the engine. "Stay," Oliver commanded Duke. The dog let out a low, dangerous rumble. He sensed the deep hostility outside. Oliver rolled his window down halfway. He placed both hands firmly on the steering wheel where they were clearly visible. He watched the side mirrors. Officer Hayes stepped out of the rear cruiser. Officer Vance stepped out of the front cruiser. Both men drew their heavy service weapons. They did not aim them directly at Oliver yet, but they kept them at the ready. They walked toward the truck slowly. Hayes approached the driver's side window. He looked entirely too confident. "Step out of the vehicle," Hayes ordered loudly. "Why did you pull me over?" Oliver asked calmly. "Your left taillight is shattered," Hayes lied smoothly. "Step out of the vehicle right now." Oliver knew his taillight worked perfectly. He also knew arguing on a deserted forest road was a fatal mistake. He moved very slowly. He opened the door with his left hand. He stepped out onto the freezing slush. He kept his hands raised at chest level. "Turn around and face the truck," Vance barked from the front bumper. Oliver turned around. He leaned his hands on the cold metal of the truck bed. He kept his head turned slightly. He used the smooth reflection of the side mirror to monitor both officers. Hayes stepped very close to Oliver's back. He patted Oliver down roughly. He kicked Oliver's boots apart. It was exactly like the physical harassment from the gas station, but much more aggressive. While Hayes distracted Oliver, Vance moved silently toward the back of the truck. Oliver watched Vance intensely in the mirror. Vance reached into his heavy winter coat. He pulled out a small, clear plastic bag. The bag contained a white, powdery substance. Vance looked around nervously. He stepped toward the open bed of Oliver's truck. He raised his hand to toss the bag into the back. They were planting drugs. A felony possession charge would instantly ruin Oliver's military career. It would put him in state prison. It would give them absolute legal authority to seize and destroy Duke. Oliver did not hesitate. He spun around instantly. He ignored Hayes completely. He stepped aggressively toward Vance. "Stop right there," Oliver commanded. His voice echoed sharply through the quiet forest. Vance froze. He still held the plastic bag in his hand. He looked caught and panicked. "Put it away, Vance," Oliver said coldly. "I see exactly what you are doing." Hayes drew his weapon fully and aimed it squarely at Oliver's chest. "Do not move. Get on the ground right now." Oliver stood his ground. He positioned his body directly in front of the passenger door. He shielded Duke from any potential crossfire. He looked at Hayes, then at Vance. "You have no dash cameras on your cruisers," Oliver stated analytically. "You picked a blind spot in the woods. You intended to plant narcotics in my vehicle. When I resisted, you intended to shoot me and claim self-defense." "Get on the ground!" Hayes screamed. His finger tightened visibly on the trigger. His face twisted with absolute rage. His plan was falling apart. Vance quickly shoved the bag of white powder back into his coat pocket. He drew his gun as well. Both officers aimed their weapons at Oliver. Oliver calculated the distance. Hayes stood 6 feet away. Vance stood 8 feet away. Oliver was unarmed. He had a severely bruised shoulder. The odds were incredibly poor. However, he was a trained combat veteran. He knew exactly how to disarm a nervous shooter. He just needed them to make the first physical mistake. "You are going to prison," Hayes spat aggressively. "Or, you are going to the morgue. Your choice." Oliver took a very slow, deliberate breath. The freezing air filled his lungs. The heavy silence of the forest pressed down on them. Inside the truck, Duke let out a ferocious bark that rattled the glass. Oliver shifted his weight to the balls of his feet. He locked his eyes on the barrel of Hayes's gun. He prepared to fight for his life and the life of his dog. The trap had closed, but Oliver refused to be the prey. "Get on the ground!" Hayes screamed again. His hands shook violently. Panic completely clouded his judgment. "If you shoot me, you will not get away with it," Oliver stated. His voice remained perfectly level. "State investigators are already looking at your department. If an active-duty Navy SEAL dies on a random mountain road the day after a viral video, they will tear this town apart." Vance swallowed hard. He looked nervously at Hayes. "He is right, man. We cannot shoot him. Just plant the bag and let us arrest him." "Shut up!" Hayes snapped. He stepped closer to Oliver. "I make the rules here." Oliver shifted his weight slightly. He prepared to strike the gun away. He needed Hayes to take one more step forward, just one more step into his striking range. Suddenly, a deep, powerful rumble vibrated through the frozen ground. It did not sound like a standard police cruiser. It sounded like multiple heavy engines running at high speed. Hayes frowned. He kept his gun aimed at Oliver, but he quickly glanced toward the main road. 3 massive black SUVs roared around the bend. They moved in perfect tactical formation. They did not use sirens. They did not use flashing lights. They moved with absolute terrifying purpose. The heavy vehicles swerved sharply onto the snowy shoulder. They boxed in the 2 white police cruisers completely. The heavy tires kicked up thick clouds of white snow and dark gravel. Hayes and Vance froze. Total shock washed over their faces. They did not understand what was happening. The doors of the black SUVs opened simultaneously. 12 heavily armed state troopers stepped out. They wore thick tactical vests. They carried standard-issue assault rifles. They immediately formed a tight perimeter around the entire scene. "Drop your weapons. Drop them right now," a state trooper commanded loudly. His rifle aimed directly at Hayes's chest. Hayes panicked. He looked at his own gun, then looked at the dozen rifles pointed directly at him. He slowly lowered his weapon and dropped it onto the snow. Vance immediately dropped his gun as well. Both corrupt officers raised their hands high into the cold air. 2 troopers rushed forward. They forcefully kicked the dropped weapons away. They grabbed Hayes and Vance, spun them around, and slammed them hard against the side of their own police cruiser. The sharp click of metal handcuffs echoed loudly in the quiet forest. Oliver relaxed his shoulders. He lowered his hands. He took a deep, steadying breath. He turned slightly and looked through the truck window. He gave Duke a small hand signal. Duke stopped barking and sat back down on the seat. The dog understood the immediate danger had passed. The rear door of the lead SUV opened. A man stepped out onto the snowy road. He wore a crisp, tailored charcoal suit. A long black wool coat hung heavily over his broad shoulders. He stood tall, with perfect posture and sharp, intelligent eyes. His face was entirely clean-shaven. He walked toward Oliver with a calm, measured stride. He held a silver badge in his right hand. Oliver looked at the man. He recognized the eyes immediately. It was Arthur. The fragile, limping, homeless man from the diner was completely gone. In his place stood a highly disciplined federal agent. Arthur stopped in front of Oliver. He extended his hand. "Special Agent Arthur Sterling, Internal Affairs Division. You handled yourself exceptionally well, soldier." Oliver shook his hand firmly. "You had a very convincing disguise, Agent Sterling." Arthur offered a small, respectful smile. "I spent the last 4 months living on these freezing streets. We knew Chief Weber ran a completely corrupt department. We knew they planted evidence, extorted locals, and used extreme violence. But they were very careful. They kept 0 digital records. They intimidated every single witness. We needed concrete proof. We needed them to make a massive public mistake." Arthur turned and looked at Hayes. Hayes stared back with wide, terrified eyes. The corrupt officer finally realized the catastrophic magnitude of his error. "You gave us that mistake, Oliver," Arthur continued. "When you stood up for me in front of that diner, you broke their control. That viral video forced their hand. They panicked. They escalated their retaliation against you. We monitored their radio channels. We tracked their cruiser GPS. We knew exactly what they planned to do to you on this road today." Vance began to cry. "I was just following orders. It was Weber's idea." "Save it for the federal judge," Arthur said coldly. He looked back at Oliver. "My teams are currently raiding the police station in town. Chief Weber is already in custody. We found the fake narcotic stash in his personal office. This entire corrupt department is finished." Oliver felt a deep sense of relief. The heavy burden of the past 2 days finally lifted. He looked at the 2 corrupt officers sitting in the snow. They looked pathetic. They no longer had their shiny badges to hide behind. "What about the dangerous animal classification?" Oliver asked. "Weber signed an order to confiscate my dog." Arthur pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket. He ripped it completely in half. "Chief Weber no longer has any authority. Your dog is perfectly safe. In fact, my tactical team was highly impressed by his discipline on that video. He is a good soldier." Oliver nodded. "He is the best." "We need you to follow us back to the state capitol," Arthur said. "We need your official statement to completely lock down these federal indictments. We will provide a full police escort. No one will ever bother you in this state again." Oliver walked over to his truck. He opened the passenger door. Duke immediately pushed his large head against Oliver's chest. Oliver rubbed the thick fur. He felt the strong, steady heartbeat. "Good boy, Duke," Oliver whispered. He closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. The forest no longer felt like a deadly trap. It felt quiet and peaceful. The long nightmare in the freezing town of Oakhaven was finally over. Justice did not just arrive. It arrived with overwhelming force. Oliver started the heavy engine of his black truck and prepared to drive into the light. The drive back into the center of Oakhaven looked entirely different. Oliver followed the convoy of black SUVs. The heavy tires crushed the snow on the main street. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the brick buildings. But this time, the lights did not represent fear. They represented actual justice. Oliver parked his black truck near the Oakhaven Police Department. He turned off the engine and stepped outside. Duke stayed right beside him. The large German shepherd walked with calm, confident steps. The scene in front of the station looked chaotic but highly organized. Dozens of state troopers secured the perimeter. They carried heavy boxes of files and computer hard drives out of the front doors. The state police moved with absolute precision. Chief Weber walked out of the building. He wore tight steel handcuffs. 2 large state troopers flanked him closely. Weber did not look arrogant anymore. His face was pale and completely defeated. He kept his eyes locked firmly on the icy ground. Following him were several other local officers, including Hayes and Vance. They all wore the exact same defeated expression. The corrupt system that choked this small logging town for years completely collapsed in a single afternoon. A small crowd of local residents slowly gathered across the street. They stood nervously on the snow-covered sidewalk. They watched the state police dismantle the local department piece by piece. Oliver noticed Martha from the diner. The older woman wrapped a thick wool shawl tightly around her thin shoulders. She stood next to the young boy from the gas station. The boy held his phone in his hands. He looked at Oliver and gave a small, highly respectful nod. Oliver nodded back in acknowledgement. The boy showed incredible courage when he recorded that video from the alleyway. He started the massive chain reaction that brought the hidden truth to the light. The people of Oakhaven did not cheer loudly. They were far too exhausted for loud celebrations. But the heavy, oppressive silence was completely gone. People whispered to each other freely. They stood a little taller in the cold air. The deep, ingrained fear vanished from their tired eyes. They realized the violent bullies no longer held any power over them. Special Agent Arthur Sterling walked over to Oliver. Arthur held a thick digital tablet. He looked highly satisfied with the rapid operation. "We secured every piece of physical evidence in the building," Arthur stated clearly. "We found the hidden financial ledgers in Weber's locked desk. We found the fake narcotics and the illegal cash in the evidence room. The FBI is taking over the entire financial investigation tomorrow morning. These men will spend a very long time in federal prison." "Good," Oliver said simply. "They preyed on the weak for years. They deserve the severe consequences." Arthur typed a few quick notes onto his tablet screen. "I need your official statement right now, Oliver. Just detail exactly what happened outside the diner and out on the forest road today." Oliver spent the next 30 minutes recounting the events. He spoke clearly and entirely factually. He described the unprovoked assault on the homeless man in the street. He detailed the brutal physical force used against him during the illegal arrest. He explained the exact timeline of the traffic stop and the deliberate attempt to plant illegal drugs in his vehicle. Arthur recorded every single word into his official report. When Oliver finally finished, Arthur extended his hand again. "Thank you for your complete cooperation," Arthur said warmly. "But more importantly, thank you for your immense courage. You saw something terribly wrong, and you stepped in immediately. Most people look the other way to protect themselves. You put your own freedom and your own physical safety on the line for a complete stranger." Oliver shook the federal agent's hand firmly. "I took an oath to protect people. That oath does not end just because I am off duty. It is a lifelong commitment." Arthur looked down at Duke. The massive dog sat perfectly still next to Oliver's leg. "I have worked alongside many highly trained canine units in my long career. I have never seen a dog show that incredible level of restraint under extreme pressure. He saved that corrupt officer's life by following your hand command. You trained him exceptionally well. He is my family," Oliver replied quietly. He reached down and scratched Duke gently behind the ears. Duke let out a soft huff of pure approval. "You are completely free to go now," Arthur said. "Have a safe trip back to your naval base. We will contact your commanding officer if the federal prosecutors need anything else for the trial." Oliver turned and walked back to his heavy black truck. He opened the passenger door wide. Duke jumped inside and settled comfortably onto the wide leather seat. Oliver walked around and climbed behind the steering wheel. He inserted the key and started the engine. He looked out the large windshield. Something shifted rapidly in the sky above the small town. The thick, oppressive gray clouds finally broke apart. Bright, warm sunlight pierced completely through the heavy winter overcast. The brilliant golden rays hit the snow-covered roofs of the small houses. The frozen ice on the black asphalt began to melt rapidly. Tiny streams of clear water ran down the sides of the street. The bitter, biting cold slowly retreated into the forest. The air felt significantly lighter and much warmer. Oliver put the heavy truck into gear. He steered away from the police station and drove slowly down the main street. He drove past the small diner. Martha stood in the front window and waved a highly grateful hand. He drove past the gas station. The young boy gave him a wide, genuine smile of deep respect. Oliver pressed the accelerator pedal. The truck picked up speed as they finally reached the town limits. The winding mountain road stretched out openly ahead of them. The tall pine trees no longer looked dark and highly threatening. They looked incredibly bright and intensely green under the clearing sky. Oliver rested his right hand warmly on Duke's head. The dog closed his dark eyes and leaned heavily into the gentle touch. The mission was completely over. They honored Miller's memory properly. They protected the innocent people of the town, and they survived the deadly trap together. The black truck disappeared swiftly down the long mountain highway. They left the town of Oakhaven far behind them, driving steadily forward under the bright and warming sun. The story of Oliver and his loyal dog Duke is a powerful reminder that true strength is not about holding a badge or having a title. True strength is having the courage to stand up for what is right, especially when everyone else decides to look away. When we witness injustice, staying silent only gives power to those who abuse their authority. Oliver did not have to step out of that diner. He could have walked away and kept himself entirely safe. But he chose to protect a vulnerable stranger, risking his own freedom because his oath to defend the innocent never truly expires. May God bless you and your loved ones with the unwavering courage to always defend the truth and protect those in need. If Oliver and Duke's journey touched your heart, please drop an amen in the comments section below. Do not forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that justice always prevails. Please like and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of loyalty, bravery, and hope.
Oh,